Yeah, I would say that there are some ways to interview that are simply better than other ways. Now, you have to focus, first of all, on what is the main purpose of any interview. The interview's purpose is to determine whether you can create, in the process of interviews, with the candidate and the employer, or whoever represents the employer, a kind of collective efficacy. What's a collective efficacy? Well, the definition of collective efficacy is really the combination of talents from more than one person that creates this sort of additional energy, this additional performance that would not exist individually. Now, in the process of the interview, you have to develop early on a sense of trust so that collective efficacy results from all of that talking and the interviewing process. When that's done, and trust can be established from the very first moment people sit down and talk with one another, then you can start to see good things come, but they can only begin when honesty and sincerity from the opening bell in any interview. So yes, there are some ways that are better than others. Some ways really don't work. And I am going to present to you 2 or 3 questions that I think will really speak to the best way to get that collective efficacy to begin. One of the most important questions you can ask any candidate is, what is your greatest passion? Now, you ask that question because you want to determine what drives them, what motivates them. People say sometimes that you can never burn out in anything unless you've been on fire. So trying to determine really what makes that person tick is really important. This is something that is totally unexpected by most candidates because people rarely ask it. They may think these things, but you have to ask that question to really elicit the response. Now, I suggest that before you actually ask that question, one of the first things you say as the person doing the interviewing to any candidate is, relax. We're here to talk about you, and you are the best expert on you. So you know way more about you than I do. So if anybody's to be nervous, it should be me, the interviewer. You can relax because we're going to talk about something you know a lot about. So when you ask the question about passion, they're already comfortable and they're already building a sense of trust with you. Employers should be about the business of hiring people for a career, not a job. A career requires a commitment of time and energy to the work, a personal commitment, whereas a job only requires time at the work. So clearly the answer to this question really should be someone who plants seeds. But in reality, you're looking for someone that can do both, because you need someone that is going to invest the time not only to plant the seeds, but then nurture those seeds, develop them, see how they grow, and then when there is fruit to pick the fruit. So you're really looking for someone that does both of those things. The right answer is someone that plants seeds and then sticks around long enough to see how that all goes to pick that fruit. The purpose of asking this question is really to achieve 2 goals. The first is to determine humility, and the second is to determine recovery. When you ask a person this question and they describe a mistake they made, this is important because everyone makes mistakes. So the secondary part, the part of what did you do about making that mistake, how did you recover from making that mistake, is also important because it describes their resourcefulness, their willingness probably to look for help, ask for help, and then proceed to making things even better. Now, the candidate that struggles with answering this question, that is someone you've got to be careful of. Because typically a person that struggles with answering this question is someone that either didn't work very hard or try very hard, because that's how you make mistakes, is trying hard, or someone really that didn't learn from their mistakes. Both of those are undesirable characteristics of any new hire. Well, the minimum number of steps really for any interview should be a 3-step process. Really 4 or even more, but a minimum of 3. So here's what they are. The first is the first initial interview really should be with the person that is considered the boss, whoever that is, might be you, with the candidate. Now, most organizations just don't do that. They somehow seem to think that the boss comes in later in the process. That's totally wrong. The initial interview should be between 2 people, the person that is the boss of the organization, because that person sets the tone. That person is the one that really drives the culture of the company, the organization, the school, whatever it may be. And if that interview isn't a good one, that is to say, if the chemistry is poor, then there's really no purpose in continuing, because the kind of self-involvement of the boss in the interview process needs to begin from step 1. And that then gives you a lot of a sense of how things will go from that point forward. The second step is where the person comes back or continues on to another set of interviews, but this time it's with the person who is the leader or the supervisor, the direct supervisor of this candidate, or will be the direct supervisor of that candidate. That's really key. They have to be part of the process. Now, with them might be other members of the team the candidate would be on. This sort of combination gives you a great sense of how the chemistry will be in the very team that the candidate would serve in. And the third and absolutely indispensable part, which a lot of organizations completely forget, is you have a third process where the candidate comes back or continues on that day and either has breakfast or lunch with other members of the team, kind of at large. Now, the breaking bread process is important because people tend to relax when they're having food, when they're sitting, talking, and the old behaviors tend to come back. And you really get a chance to reveal the personalities of everyone during that process. Chemistry also plays a role in this process. Best place for that is where people break bread together. And the secondary part of that third piece is where that person then, that candidate, also is involved in working with the team, doing actual work, possibly even leading something on the team to determine how much do they know. This is key because oftentimes people impress when you talk in a closed environment, but when you actually put them under some pressure, it could be a very different story. I advise that from the very beginning of any interview, that the interviewer takes the time to actually acknowledge the fact that this is a mutual interview, because that is an opportunity for both parties, the candidate and the person interviewing the candidate, to ask questions of one another. The goal really is to have the perfect fit. You can't do that if it's one-sided. The days of the one-sided interview are a thing of the past. They're just the dinosaurs of the 21st century. So you have to keep in mind a couple of very important data facts. One, in the United States, for example, people stay in a job just under 5 years, in any job. And if they're aged 25 to 34, that time is less. That age group really only stays with a job less than 3 years. So, if the goal is to continue to keep hiring and hiring like it's a revolving door, don't take time on the interviews. But if your goal is to put an investment in, because hiring is an expensive process, and training and onboarding, if the goal is to do that properly and economically and successfully, acknowledge that everybody's interviewing everybody, and then the real good questions come up, and then the fit is established.